Welcome to All Pro Football Data. My name is Jim Coburn, and today's episode we're talking about the Denver Broncos 2024 NFL Draft Class based on data. So, in today's episode, we'll be looking at the data profiles of the prospects selected by the Broncos based on production, athleticism, and other statistical factors. I'm a lot different from other draft grade evaluators because I look at things like draft pick approximate value. What that is I look at, okay, the prospect they took, where they were selected at, what is the average AV of that selection? Does this prospect have the potential to outperform that AV? And what that is when you look at this chart right here, this tells you the average AV for prospects in different pick ranges. So as you can see at the very top of the draft, typically you'll get a player that's 98% better than the rest of the NFL when you select a player between picks 1 through 5. And then, of course, as you pick less and less in the draft, it starts to diminish. You start to get less value as you go down in the draft. So I'm going to be looking for prospects that have the potential to outperform their draft status in other rounds. And if they don't have that potential, then they need to. Then they're not going to get that good of a grade. And why? Because I use another thing called EAV, or expected approximate value grades. So what is expected approximate value? It essentially looks at all of the statistical grades on these prospects. It looks at production. It looks at athleticism, strength of schedule, strength of team. It looks at the age of a prospect. It looks at their physical metrics. How tall they are, how big they are, their arm length, and everything that matters to that position, everything that correlates to long-term success at that position, is going to be added to that data grade to give one number to be able to kind of identify, okay, what type of prospect are we talking about here? Is he a high-end data prospect or a low-end data prospect? And based on the data work that I've done, which you can go to the top 50 prospects video that I did on this channel, you can see the correlations to success. It has a very, very high correlation to success, and especially when you marry draft status with EAV, you have an increased chance of having a successful player. So I have proven through my data that if you take prospects that have above average data grades and you draft them in the NFL, you're more likely going to have a successful outcome. Now, there are other things to consider, of course, film, psychological makeup, which is where limiting factors come in. So there are some things that limits data, of course. Physical and mental makeup can affect the data. Um, Unforeseen injuries can affect it. Coaching of a team. These are all the factors that can limit the data. So again, I don't have a perfect system. There's always going to be things that are going to be kinks in there, if you will. But this is how these are the things that can affect the data, if that makes any sense. So that is what it is in terms of that. Now, and this is their needs assessment. So taking a look at the Denver Broncos in terms of their needs, these are all the prospects that they have on the roster right now. NFL positional value is how they actually have performed, and then all the players on the and all the numbers on the right is the data grade, which is the EAV score, is what their score was coming out of college. So a lot of these players might improve and kind of outperform their status, if you will, in terms of data. But this is kind of where we're at right now. The Broncos are not that great of a football team. Based on data, they're not. Based on how they actually performed. So they have a lot of needs. They have a lot of things that they need to get better at in terms of everything. And when you look at the next aspect of this, you look at the offensive side of the football. Based on that needs assessment, these are all the prospects that they need to look for: quarterback, running back, offensive line. Those are the biggest needs on offense for them. When you get to the defensive side of the football, defensive tackle, linebacker, and safety are the biggest needs for them. Overall, in terms of the biggest factors in the final grade, I look for three main things. Did they meet their roster needs? I think that's a big thing that you need to look for. Did they draft good prospects? Did they draft prospects that have the data potential to outperform their draft status? All those things are what I do in terms of my draft grades. And with that, let's get to the prospects. So starting with the number one pick that they selected, and pick number 12, Bo Nix, quarterback out of Oregon. His data grade was 70.64 out of 100. His floor was 77.7, and his balance grade was 74.18 with a pick AV of 96.53 out of 100. The overall grade for this would be a C. When you take a look at Bo Nix, he did have a lot of really good data. His mobile quarterback score was very high in the 90 plus percentile, so he has a lot of ability uh, to move in the pocket and outside of the pocket, in terms of like as a rusher. Also, he had a really good quarterback efficiency score. Was taking a look at his efficiency score. He had a 96.88 BQS score, which is his best quarterback efficiency score in college, and his career quarterback score, which was his career college efficiency was 75 percentile. He doesn't quite have all pro potential because of that, more so closer to Pro Bowl and starter. But the biggest reason why he scored so low was his age. He's 24 years old. I know a lot of people have talked a lot about age this year. A lot of people are sick of people talking about age. We're tired of you talking about age, Jim. But the data says what it says. And every single quarterback taken in the first round that was 24 or higher are guys like Chad Pennington. You have players like, well, again, Bo Nix is kind of added to that group. And then, of course, Ryan Tannehill. So, again, guys, age, again, I understand people are tired of hearing about age, but age does factor into quarterback performance, and it's been that way for a very long time in terms of data. So, that's the biggest thing with that. However, I think Bo Nix does have a chance to become a long-term starter, but I think his upside potential is not necessarily as an all-pro or Pro Bowl player. He has a potential to be a Pro Bowler, a sort of a outlier, a guy that could outperform his data, but he is a little bit of a concern because of his age. Next up, we get to pick 76 and Jonah Ellis, edge out of Utah. His data grade or ceiling is 95.99. His floor is 67.22 with a balanced grade of 81.60. And the AV for where he was selected is 67.95 out of 100. I would give this overall pick a A. Taking a look at edge rusher data here, Jonah Ellis had really good solo tackle, sack, and TFL data. When you look at his other edge rusher market share, really great pass deflection market share at the position as well. And in terms of athleticism traits, we didn't really get anything from him in terms of that. 58.92 in terms of his speed score, but he is definitely an impressive athlete, nevertheless, in terms of in terms of what he could potentially become at the next level. Now, when you get to his adjusted production traits, he had a 98 percentile age score, 98 percentile MSA rating, and 96 percentile pass score. He was one of those edge rushers in this class that had all pro to Pro Bowl potential, and I think it is very good for the Broncos to take this selection here because I think he has everything that you're looking for in terms of a really productive um, long-term outside linebacker, rush linebacker, and I think he might surprise a lot of folks. I think a lot of people have slept on Jonah Ellis, and the Broncos got a steal here. I really do believe they did that. Then, of course, we get to pick 102 and Troy Franklin, wide receiver out of Oregon. His data grade or ceiling is 90.60 out of 100. His projected floor grade is 57.64 with a balanced grade of 74.12. The average AV of prospects taken at pick 102 is 59, and his overall pick grade would be an A. So he is a prospect that has 90 plus percentile potential in terms of his data, and he was taken at pick 102 where most prospects only average, at least in terms of his position, they only average about 57 percentile there. So that's a good selection for them. And when you look at his data, great receiving market share, great total offensive market share, and good touchdown market share. Efficiency-wise, this is another thing that was really impressive about him was he was very efficient with the football in his hands. Very good in terms of yards per reception, and TD percentage was also very high for him. Athletically, he wasn't the best. This is probably why he fell to round 4 because he was very small and he did test well in terms of the raw numbers, but his size is what dropped him a lot. So he has below average explosiveness, speed, and flexibility for his size. He was somebody who probably should have ran maybe 4.3 or 4.2 to kind of be like an above average speed guy for how thin he is. So that definitely is a bit of a concern, but his production traits are very good. And the NFL is a lot different now. We've seen a huge influx of undersized wide receivers, undersized cornerbacks, undersized anything to do with the skill position area. Most of them are undersized. So I don't think it really hurts Troy Franklin that much, because this is kind of what things are going towards now, is instead of those beefy, wide receivers that would kind of help out with the blocking game, with the running game. They're not doing that anymore. They're mainly kind of built like gazelles instead of built like whatever other animal you want to talk about there. So I'm not going to really name what other animal it is, but but anyways, moving on to adjusted production traits. Troy Franklin did really well in terms of this. His age score was 96 percentile, 95 percentile in terms of the MSA rating, and 96 in terms of his pass rating. So great ability to become a really great wide receiver. So I'm excited to see what happens with him. He did test very similar to Jerry Jeudy. I think that was kind of the mindset with it, is let's get the replacement for Jerry Jeudy, but maybe somebody who might be better. Again, if something's new, it might be better. So we'll see what happens with that, but definitely excited about him. Then, of course, we get to pick 145 and Chris Abrams, cornerback out of Missouri. His data grade is 72.35. Floor grade is 41.83 with a balance grade of 57.09. The average AV of a pick selected here is 32.82. And the overall pick grade I would give them is a C. Taking a look at his cornerback data, great production traits, 90 plus percentile interception data, and 90 percentile pass deflection data, with above average solo tackle data. So he was a very productive cornerback at Missouri. Athleticism wise, this is where things kind of fell off the rails. He had below average speed, significantly below average explosiveness, and below average flexibility for his size. So he was very productive at Missouri, but didn't test that well as an athlete. Then when you get to his adjusted production traits, based on his pass score, he was 90 plus percentile in terms of that particular area, but his age was about 65 percentile, remember, in the 60 percentile area. So he's a little bit older, has a really good production for his level of competition, but again, his athleticism is a little bit suspect. But I kind of graded him out as like a potential starter based on his overall data grade. Then, of course, we get to pick 147, Audric Estime, running back out of Notre Dame. His data grade is 93.04 out of 100. His floor is 55.98 with a balanced grade of 74.51 out of 100. Pick AV is 34.75 out of 100. And overall pick grade I would give him is an A. Taking a look at his offensive market share scores, he had 79 percentile in terms of total offensive market share, 49 percentile in terms of receiving market share, and then 82 percentile in terms of touchdown market share. All those numbers are decent for the position. His receiving market share is a little bit of a red flag, but he does make it up for that with his touchdown market share and his total offensive market share. He also was great in terms of his yards per touch and his TD percentage. All those areas were very good. So he had great efficiency scores, with the exception of his yards per reception numbers. And when you get to athleticism traits, he had a 93 percentile explosion score and then a 67 percentile speed score based on his pro day timing numbers. Now, if you go by the combine number, the 4.740 number, he would be more so a below average speed athlete. However, and I've done videos in the past on it, you can check out my other videos on Audric Estime on this channel. He is somebody who has a unique athletic skill set that could work really well in sort of a horizontal rushing attack. So do not be discouraged by his 40-yard dash, because based on his athleticism traits, based on how he performed at Notre Dame, he could be one of the biggest steals of this draft class. I think the Broncos got two big steals in Jonah Ellis and Audric Estime. I think both of those prospects could vastly outperform their where a lot of people pegged them at, because they have great all-around data. Then, of course, we get to adjusted production traits for Audric Estime. Again, probably the best adjusted production traits in this draft class. And Estime is also one of the youngest running backs in this draft class, which is definitely a good indication of potential over time. So I'm excited about Estime. I think he's going to be a great running back for them. And if he fails, I don't think it's going to be because of his speed. I think there's a lot of things he does really well, and he'll carve out some form of what he needs to do at the NFL level. Then, of course, you get to pick 235 and Devon Veely, wide receiver out of Utah. When you take a look at his data grade, he had a 28 percentile data grade, 21.85 in terms of floor, 25.12 in terms of his balance grade, with 8.88 in terms of his pick AV. Overall grade for this would be a F, significantly below average data grade. Taking a look at his production traits, not really non-existent, below average total offensive market share, below average touchdown market share. Taking a look at his efficiency scores, below average in terms of yards per reception and TD percentage, not really where you want it to be. Athleticism wise, above average explosiveness and speed, but not really where you want the Pro Bowl averages and All Pro averages to be in terms of that particular metric. So definitely kind of scary from that perspective. And when you look at his adjusted production traits, he's a very old prospect who was not very productive and not incredibly athletic. So I don't really see where this pick is really going to take them. I think this is probably somebody who's more of a camp body when you look at all of his data together. But again, he might surprise. He might. I mean, you never know. You never know. I don't want to write off these prospects immediately, but there definitely is a lot of negative things to his profile. Then, of course, we get to the last pick of the draft, which, of course, is Rasputin. Oh, excuse me. I mean, Nick Gargulo, offensive center out of South Carolina. His data grade is 91.51 out of 100. His projected floor is 45.75 out of 100, and his balance grade is 68.63 out of 100. The overall AV would be 1.93, with the overall grade being an A. Based on his athleticism traits, he was fantastic. 88 percentile in terms of his explosion score, 64.82 in terms of speed, and 93.37 in terms of flexibility for his size. This is a great all-around athleticism profile for a center, for a guard, for any interior offense lineman, and I think he'll fit the Broncos perfectly and potentially could become a long-term starter for them. So I am very excited about this pick. Then we get to the final grade. So I'm going to give them a C plus. Did they meet all of their roster needs? I would say yes. Did they draft good prospects? Yes. Did they draft prospects that have the data potential to outperform their draft status? Absolutely yes. The overall rank for the Broncos based on value and talent in this class would be a 3 out of 32. The Broncos put a lot of solid talent with the potential to outperform their draft slots in this particular draft class. So even though I'm not so hot on the quarterback they selected, I think you needed a quarterback. You just had to take one, so you took one. But the rest of the draft class, I think, is very decent. I think there's a lot of sneaky good prospects in there, a lot of really productive prospects that could outperform their draft status. And I'm really excited to see what happens with that. So overall, that was the overall draft grades for the Denver Broncos 2024 NFL Draft Class. Make sure you check out patreon.com/jcoburn to follow more of my data work on there. Also, check out my X, formerly known as Twitter account at Geometrics, and purchase the 2024 NFL Draft Class Analytics Guide available today, going over all the prospects in this draft. I think it's applicable to anything. If you're just a regular NFL fan, if you're just a fan of the NFL Draft, if you're a fan of the Denver Broncos, whatever team it is, buy that guide. All of the prospects I just talked about today are in that guide, and I think you'll benefit greatly by having that for yourself to kind of look at everything at your leisure. So, with everything out of the way, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.